What's going on, college hoops heads? This is another edition of the Center Hub's very own The One and Done podcast. You're either hearing this on the One and Done feed or on the Center Hub's YouTube channel. But nonetheless, we are here. I'm joined as always by John Simpson, but we have a very special guest today. We have Theo Lawson joining us today from the Spokesman Review, which is a Spokane Luca newspaper, if I'm understanding correctly. So Theo covers, a lot of Gonzaga basketball. And we are here to talk about, everything that's transpired with the Tyon Grant-Foster, outcome and decision as this happened. So Theo, first of all, thank you for joining us, but how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me on today.
John, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great.
So we are recording this Tuesday, October 28th. It was literally yesterday where Tyon Grant-Foster received a preliminary injunction from a judge in Spokane. I believe it was district court, if I'm remembering correctly.
County court, I believe.
County court, yeah, because they tried removing it to federal, and we'll get there. But nonetheless, he received a preliminary injunction from a judge who actually graduated from Gonzaga, Theo. Is that correct, ironically enough?
Yeah. I think you'll find in Spokane that most of the judges and attorneys around here graduated from Gonzaga Law. It's a pretty prominent law program in the area. So, whether it was her or someone else, I think there was a good chance that they were going to have a Gonzaga Law degree.
So, nonetheless, we are here, and Tyon Grant-Foster is able to play. Theo was actually at the courthouse yesterday for a 2.5-hour hearing, and Gonzaga, of course, had an exhibition against who was a Western Oregon. I know it wasn't. Yeah,
that's right.
So Theo was, in the weeds yesterday. I'll say. So my first question is: Do you have any sort of time frame of when Tyon, filed this initial waiver for eligibility?
Yeah. So Tyon obviously was at Grand Canyon the last 2 years, and then decided to enter the transfer portal back in, I guess, March, April. Committed to Gonzaga in late May, I believe the last week of May, and then the school filed the eligibility waiver for him in early June. So the initial waiver was applied for in June. It was denied in July. They filed for a re-request or reconsideration. After that was denied. They filed an appeal to that. That was denied. And that's how Tyon Grant-Foster ended up filing a lawsuit a couple weeks ago. I believe it was 2 Fridays ago. I don't know the date. Shortly after the appeal was denied, they filed the lawsuit, decided to take the NCAA to court because basically he had until, I guess today, the 28th, to accept his scholarship at Gonzaga. That's the last day that winter sports athletes can accept scholarships. So they were kind of up against a pretty firm timeline. And of course, the season starts for them on Monday against Texas Southern. So they really kind of needed to get this through right away if he had any chance of playing this season.
So I actually don't know, John, was that public knowledge that the waiver was denied multiple times? I know the most recent one was, which was what prompted the lawsuit, but I haven't heard anything about, these previous appeals being denied, basically, for the waiver.
Yeah, no, I don't think I had either.
But we knew there was the practice waiver. Yeah.
Yeah. So just background on that too. So he got the practice waiver accepted basically a month ago. And then when the NCAA denied the last appeal, they kind of revoked the practice waiver as well. So for the last 2 weeks, he hasn't been able to practice with the team. Couldn't even lift weights with the team. Basically, up until yesterday, until after the court hearing, he couldn't do anything with the team as far as official capacity. Of course, he was still hanging out off the court, going to dinners, and obviously communicating with them. But he was kind of revoked of doing anything from the team once the practice waiver was eliminated.
So at that point, once the practice waiver was revoked, everything was denied, and Tyon and his legal team decided to file, this lawsuit against the NCAA. Can you sort of walk us through that process as much as you can?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, the lawsuit was filed, I believe, 2 Fridays ago, or I think it was the Tuesday before last Tuesday. Then the appeal came Friday. So they had planned to set up a preliminary injunction hearing for last Thursday. that would have taken place at Spokane County Courthouse. That was also interesting because that was the same day as West Coast Conference Media Day in Las Vegas. So Mark Few was planning to be in Vegas and then decided to stay back in Spokane to go to the court hearing, and of course the court hearing never happened. So his assistant coach was still in Vegas at Media Day. But basically, the hearing didn't happen because the NCAA decided to file a notice of removal, kind of requesting that the case go up to a federal court. They felt it was a federal issue; it should be heard in front of a federal court, and that delayed the injunction on Thursday. Kind of funny, actually. Tyon's lawyer, who is really kind of well versed in NCAA cases, was in from North Carolina and actually was supposed to be flying out on that Friday just because he didn't expect a hearing to happen. And then, he told me he was, I think he's probably okay with me sharing this, but he was actually getting into an Uber Friday morning to go to Spokane Airport when they got the notice that the notice of removal was basically denied. So they could end up, it was remanded back to Spokane County Court. So Elliot Abrams, his attorney, stayed in Spokane. And then they obviously rescheduled that hearing for Monday at 2:30 Spokane. So it's kind of a whirlwind of a week as far as hearing was supposed to happen, wasn't going to happen. Now it's back on. And of course, like I mentioned, this 28th deadline, they really needed to kind of get that hearing in kind of at the buzzer to make sure he can play.
Yeah. So, John, I'm sure you have a question or two, but real quick, just for those who follow us, know us, you guys know I do have a law degree. So this is, very rarely do I get to come on a basketball podcast and nerd out a little bit with any legalese. But basically, a preliminary injunction is basically a temporary order that I suppose someone's asking the courts to refrain a party from doing something. In this case, the NCAA refraining from denying his eligibility, essentially. But I honestly was pretty surprised when I heard that they were trying to remand it to federal court. I wasn't surprised by that. I was surprised it was denied. And Theo, based off what you just said, it seemed like Tyon's attorney, the North Carolina attorney that you were just alluding to, seems like he might have been a little bit surprised as well, given, he was already booking as playing back. So
yeah, he was. I think he fully expected it to be moved to federal court. But I think it was U.S. District Judge Thomas Rice, who also happens to be a Gonzaga law graduate, was the one who kind of signed off on the order, essentially saying that it shouldn't be a federal issue, that this isn't a federal case. The federal court doesn't have jurisdiction on this case, and so he's the one who signed off on the order to remand it back to Spokane County Court. And like you mentioned, Elliot Abrams was very surprised, and then he ended up staying the weekend and preparing for the hearing on Monday.
Okay, so John, does that prompt any questions leading up to what transpired yesterday?
Yeah, I guess my question is more about, what was the feeling around the camp? What were the attitudes? Kind of, because it's been kind of an up and down practice, with getting the practice waiver, and then going up to the court, and then thinking you're going to be in Spokane court, and then then we're thinking we're going to federal court, and we got this deadline looming over us of the 28th. It almost seems like that was going to kind of put being able to accept that scholarship and play this year out of reach. To getting to find out you're coming back to Spokane court, you're going to get to hear a judge in front of that. What was the vibe? What was the feeling around? Were they feeling good about it? Was it feeling like a lost cause? And then, hearing they're coming back.
Yeah. I think it's been just a lot of ups and downs for both Tyon and obviously Gonzaga. They're trying to build out their rotations and prepare for Monday's, season opener. And obviously if Tyon's, able to play, he's a big part of what they can do this season. I think he really raises their ceiling as far as being a second weekend team or further in the NCAA tournament. But for him, he was living back home in Kansas City most of the offseason, and then he gets the practice waiver. He's able to come and kind of move to Spokane for the first time. He's practicing with the team. He actually was able to play they have a Craziness in the Kennel kind of preseason showcase, scrimmage, dunk contest, all that, 3-point contest. And so that was kind of his first introduction to the fan base. He comes out and it's a big moment for him and really kind of a nice moment considering what he's been through. And then, a week later, he's told he can't practice with the team. So has to deal with that news. And then he's kind of stuck in limbo until the lawsuit's over. So it's been kind of a touch and go, month, a couple months for Gonzaga and Tyon, and the coaches and his teammates have talked about how hard it's been on him mentally. I can only imagine just kind of the frustration and the happiness and the ups and downs of kind of the last couple months. And I'm sure we'll get to the game, but he said last night in the post-game press conference that he can finally sleep now. He can sleep. I think he's lost a lot of sleep over the last 5 months really, and obviously now it's resolved. But yeah, the last few weeks I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and no one really knew kind of how this court case was going to go. Once you get in front of a judge, I think anything can happen. So I think they said last night that they were all optimistic it would happen, and they were encouraging him and telling him to stay positive. But obviously, until you get that ruling, if you're Tyon Grant-Foster, you have to be a little bit nervous and kind of restless.
So going off of that, I suppose just let us know what was. We know what happened yesterday in terms of the ruling going in his favor, but I suppose just walk us through, there's a 2.5 hour hearing. You had to then cover the exhibition game, which Tyon ended up playing a couple minutes in. So we're sort of going to just give you the floor here. What transpired yesterday, and what can you tell us?
Yeah, I really think the time frame is kind of interesting because the hearing was 2:30 p.m. here in Spokane, and then Gonzaga's game against Western Oregon exhibition game, but that was a 6 p.m. tip off. So I was told before the hearing that they only had an hour window to hear this case, and so I was thinking, all right, they're done by 3:30. If he's good to go, you can get back to the arena in plenty of time. Coach Few, who was there, can get back. They had three teammates were also there in attendance to support Tyon. So it seemed like enough time between kind of the case and the basketball game. But obviously the case went 2.5 hours instead of an hour, and they kind of broke for intermission around 4:30, and then after that, Judge Marla Pullen came back in and said, I think we were supposed to be under an hour window. So she kind of encouraged both sides to kind of wrap up their arguments, and Tyon's two attorneys who were there arguing for him had one more chance each to make a statement. The NCAA's attorney had one more chance to make a statement, and then after that, around 5 p.m., Judge Pullen made a ruling and obviously granted the injunction. And also, kind of an important part of this, she also granted an injunction for the restitution rule that the NCAA could potentially invoke if they appeal the case and then win that appeal. They could, this rule kind of states that they can strike any awards that Tyon wins throughout the year, that they could possibly wipe out any wins that Gonzaga has with him on the court. So it was really important too to get that injunction for the restitution rule. So now the NCAA can't come back and take away any awards from Tyon or the school. But just a really long hearing. Both sides presented a lot of arguments, and kind of interesting to hear the NCAA's perspective of things. And I thought some of their arguments were interesting. And obviously, me not being someone well versed in law, I just thought some of their claims are false, and kind of a weird argument. But anyway, she makes a ruling at 5 p.m. Very emotional scene. Mark Few stayed all the way until the end of the hearing, with the game in an hour. So I was kind of expecting he would just be there till the end, and then his assistant coach Brian Michelson would take over if need be. But they got everything wrapped up, and Tyon and Mark Few drove in a car back to the kennel. Again, it's about a 10-minute drive, and supposedly Tyon called his mom. It was a very emotional moment in the car. And then Tyon got into the locker room, put a jersey on, and I'm honestly surprised he didn't have his jersey on underneath his dress shirt and tie. But he's out running onto the court, joining the layup line about 20 minutes before tip off. So just a really kind of unique. I mean, I don't know if anything like this has happened in college basketball history, where someone who's ineligible 30 minutes earlier is running onto the court and getting ready to play.
So, John, I already know the question you're going to ask because you just sort of asked with your last question. But how was the crowd, when Tyon shows up at the stadium and, runs on the court, whatever it was?
Yeah, I mean, you can only imagine. I mean, the kennel's known to be one of the louder, kind of intimate environments of college basketball. It's a smaller venue. It's only holds 6,000 people, so it has a chance to get really loud, and they sell out exhibition games, let alone the big time games against like Creighton, like they're playing this season. So I mean, he runs out. I think everyone's anticipating it. Everyone's kind of in the know. They know that he's won the court case half hour earlier, and so really big ovation. The students, so they call it the Kennel Club. They were chanting, tie on. So that was really unique. And then obviously at the game, he obviously isn't starting, but he checks in. I want to say 8-9 minutes into the game. I can't remember the exact timestamp, but he gets to the scorer's table, another big ovation. The announcer speaks his name, and he runs out, and it's just kind of wild again, and he's raising his arms up to the crowd, and really cool moment for someone who's obviously been in limbo for the last 5 months.
Of course. Then I have one more question in terms of the preliminary injunction argument by the NCAA. Then John, if you have any follow up at that point. I believe I actually think you put it either in your story, Theo, or you tweeted it, but basically the NCAA was counting, they weren't even counting the Kansas year against Tyon, where he played one game and, for lack of a better term, basically had heart failure on the court. But it was the 2 Grand Canyon years and the 2 JUCO years, which doesn't really, I'm asking because, as I'm sure you know, it doesn't line up with the NCAA, the JUCO ruling of previous lawsuits, basically, that JUCO eligibility doesn't count in terms of year of eligibility. So, I mean, can you shed any light on that, or is that just like as much as there was to it?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the argument is that he played 2 seasons before his heart failure and 2 seasons after. Obviously, you can't count the Kansas year because that was COVID. So I believe that they were counting his 2 seasons at Indian Hills Community College, and like you mentioned, that there's this Pavia waiver that was basically a blanket waiver for all former JC athletes to get another year of eligibility in 2025, 26, and so that was obviously one of the things that Tyon's attorneys brought up, and that's been a key part of this whole case, and so. Really confusing to hear them bring that up, and you're just kind of wondering, like, is there something I don't know about? Is there a reason that they think that both of those seasons should count? And so they basically just said he had enough time to play 4 years of college basketball. He should be out of eligibility, and they brought up, of course, a number of other arguments about kind of the integrity of competition. And one of the more bizarre ones they brought up is that men can't compete in the WNBA, and able-bodied athletes can't compete in the Paralympics, and so. I just found that really kind of, it's not even close to the same thing as what we're talking about here. Is someone who should have another year of eligibility, and someone who literally couldn't play for 2 years because his heart stopped and he basically died on the court. So really interesting, and yeah, ultimately the judge decided that he should have another year.
Okay, John, any follow-ups?
Not really. I mean, I think we kind of covered the whole thing. I just kind of wanted to comment maybe, how how resilient Tyon is, even before this, coming back from talking about what happened at DePaul and stuff, and how up and down this career has been, and how, you got to think that, some of that fight played into this, and him going to the wire to the very end, to have the opportunity to run out on the court. And then also, from what you were talking about, it seems like Mark Few was right there with him through this whole thing. And that's what was really impressive to me. Coach Few got a game hanging out at the courthouse to the very end, and giving Tyon a ride to the stadium and all that, and I imagine that must be something that's pretty on brand for him as well.
Covering Gonzaga, you hear a lot about culture. I mean, that can be kind of an overused buzzword cliche in college basketball, but I think that's a pretty good example of a head coach waiting for 2.5 hours inside a courtroom where it can be as I'm sure Steven knows, a little dry and boring at times if you're not one of the people making an argument. So the fact that he stuck it out, I had no reason to believe he was ever going to leave and go to the game just to be there an hour early or anything like that. I think he was going to stick it out, and I think he also kind of knew the importance of being there. And if a judge sees his coach there and then 3 teammates, I think having that, showing a support from the community. There were a couple of Gonzaga fans there too, so I think that was really important for him to be there, and he's such a big figure in the community. So kind of showing that leadership was really, really important to the case, I think.
And I'll just chime in very quickly, given, you said Tyon was previously at home in Kansas City, and you said he called his mom, so I'm assuming his family couldn't make it out. So, like, his Gonzaga family really going out supporting him is another, piece to really show that culture.
Yeah.
So, before we wrap up, Theo, Gonzaga's coming off their first year where they haven't made a Sweet 16. I think they had 9 straight Sweet 16 appearances, 8 or 9.
9. It was
nine. Okay, so
they lost to Houston.
So they lose to Houston last year, who obviously goes on to lose in the national championship game. But 9 straight Sweet 16s before that. What are your expectations for Gonzaga this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think it's a really unique team because there's a lot of moving pieces. Obviously, a guy like Tyon and someone who has that kind of impact being in and out, and you don't know if he's going to play. But not only him, they have 3 players on this team who redshirted last year, including Still Ventures, who hasn't played in 3 years since he was at Eastern Washington, and he's coming off consecutive ACL and Achilles injuries. So he's healthy, and he's actually started in both of the exhibition games. So he's someone who's not only coming back to play one more season, at least one more season, but I think he's someone who they expect to have a big role. And Braden Smith, the point guard, not the Purdue Braden Smith, but the Colgate Braden Smith, redshirted last year to kind of learn from Ryan Nemhard. Really unique for a former mid-major player of the year to transfer and be willing to redshirt. But he's a Seattle kid, wanted to come back home to Washington and obviously play in a program that's produced a lot of great point guards. So he's poised to kind of take that role on. And then kind of the other redshirting guy is Jalen Worley, who was at Florida State and then Virginia, entered the transfer portal when Tony Bennett retired. Had to sit out last year, and he's another guy who's kind of just been learning the system and kind of waiting for his opportunity. But everything kind of starts with Braden Huff and Graham Ike, the 2 big men, and they hadn't played together really in the same lineup until the conference championship game against St. Mary's, and Gonzaga had lost twice to St. Mary's in the regular season and kind of wanted to switch things up and take advantage of a matchup at the 4 with St. Mary's as 4-man. So they won those 2 games. They won that game, beat Georgia, kind of blitzed Georgia in the first round of the tournament. And then those 2 guys actually played really well in that Houston game that they lost. Ike scored 27 points, and then I think Huff was 11 points or something like that. So I think they combined for almost 40 points. And it's just going to be hard to stop 2 guys like that are so efficient around the rim and so crafty and good at their footwork. And you're going to have Braden Huff at the 4 guarding a lot of smaller players. He's 6'10", so it's going to be a huge lineup, and I really think there's a lot of depth on this roster. I think they go 10 deep, or maybe now 11 deep, with Tyon officially in the mix for good. So I think the realm of possibilities are pretty wide. They're ranked number 21 in the preseason poll. I think some people probably feel that's too high. Some people probably feel it's too low. So we'll kind of see where it ends up. And they obviously have a lot of big non-conference games that will kind of tell us early, what this team looks like and how many players really can kind of play in this rotation.
Yeah. And we just did a college basketball season preview magazine. It ended up being 413 pages, but I preface that to say, when our Gonzaga writer, Tuck Clary, he is so high on Mario Saint Supri. So that's another name, but that's a testament to the depth of this team that he wasn't even mentioned just now.
He's someone who I really think could play a really big role. Maybe not immediately off the bat. I think Braden Smith is their starting point guard on night 1 against Texas Southern, but Mario has played at the top level of Spanish basketball, and I think most people would argue that the Liga Endesa, the ACB in Spain, is probably a top 3 league in the world, if not a top 2 league after the NBA in terms of pro basketball league. So he's got a lot of international experience. He played in Eurobasket. He's really crafty. I think he kind of brings something different to point guard spot, Braden Smith is a lot like Ryan Nemhard in that he's pretty small. Maybe not known as as kind of the best defender. I think he's capable certainly, but Mario's 6'4", 6'5", really crafty. I think is someone who can score too. So he shoots it well. He's got a really kind of interesting flair. So I think he's going to play a lot, and I could certainly see him possibly playing kind of the 2 guard. And Gonzaga likes to have 2 ball handlers in the lineup at the same time. If you go back to like the Jalen Suggs, Andrew Nemhard year back in 2021. They started together. So I could certainly see if Mario really emerges and he's someone that you just can't keep on the bench. I could see him going, Braden Smith and Mario, but certainly he's going to play a big role off the bench to start the year probably. And, if he continues to grow, I'm sure they'll find a way to get him more minutes and potentially start him.
Okay. Again, I went to Temple, so I'm a Temple fan, but I always identify as my West Coast team being Gonzaga. So it's pretty cool having you on and just talking Gonzaga basketball. John, any follow-ups before we sign off?
Yeah, the only question I have is, I know that Tyon didn't get a whole lot of minutes last night. He's literally just came from the courthouse and first time on the court. But for us that didn't get to watch it, how do you look?
Yeah, so he comes in, and actually I think his first possession on defense, he gets a steal in the backcourt and then throws a dime to Grant Mika who tosses down a one-handed dunk. So we talked about the crowd reacting to him entering the arena and checking to the game. Just imagine how it sounded after that play. But he definitely looked rusty. You can tell he's someone who hasn't spent a lot of time in the system, learning the offense, and he's going to take some time to kind of get ramped up. And kind of the interesting thing with Gonzaga is that they have to get a lot of these wins early because that's kind of their chance to build their resume. They can't rely on WCC play to get a lot of quad 1 wins. So usually if you're in another conference, you kind of have all of non-league play to ramp up, and hopefully like you're fine by SEC play or Big Ten play or whatever. But they have a lot of games early that they need to win. So it's going to be interesting to see how fast he's able to assimilate. And he is someone who's played in a lot of systems. He's experienced. So he's 25 years old. He's going to be 26 by the time the season's over. So I think he's going to be kind of ahead of the curve in terms of being able to learn the system. So he's not there yet, but again, he's been in and out. He practiced for maybe 5 or 6 days, couldn't practice, and so obviously it's really important that he got this decision yesterday because he's still going to have 5 or 6 days until the season opener, and I'm not sure how much he's going to play in that game, but they're playing Texas Southern, so hopefully a game where he can kind of warm up a little bit and get some minutes, and then their next game after that is Oklahoma at Spokane Arena. So the marquee games kind of get real after that, and then it's Creighton and Arizona State and the Players Era Festival, and probably I think there's 4 or 5 more after that. So we'll kind of see what it looks like. He's rusty right now, but he certainly brings a dynamic to this team that they didn't have before, as far as being kind of a really dynamic 2-way guy who can score, who can defend, and so he's certainly going to be a big part of what they do, and we'll see kind of what the minutes look like early.
Okay, John, anything else?
No, that's it.
Just want to make sure. So, okay, this concludes this episode. If you guys are watching on YouTube or in our podcast feed, we have the link to our college basketball, the season preview magazine I alluded to. 413 pages, $12. Go purchase it. Whether you're a novice, expert, you'll learn a thing or two just with the in-depth coverage we have. You can follow me on Twitter at @the_NBAGEL. That's NBAGELL. You can follow John at John Simpson 42. You can follow Theo at Theo Lawson _SR. Theo, anything you want to plug before you sign off?
You mentioned my Twitter, but also spokesman.com. That's where you can find all of our coverage. We have a season preview section coming out, I believe, Thursday. So I've got a big feature on Graham Ike and Braden Huff and kind of some WCC previews and other content that we'll have out. And then obviously, go back to check out our coverage throughout the year. We really kind of treat Gonzaga basketball like the Dallas Cowboys around here. So we have 2 people covering every game and a photographer and a columnist. So we really invest a lot into covering Gonzaga, and encourage anyone to check out the coverage. Yeah,
I second that. So go check out our work at the-center-hub.com, at the center hub _BB on our socials as well. And yeah, college basketball season's here. You're hearing this either Tuesday or Wednesday or later. College basketball season starts on Monday, so it can't come soon enough. So myself, John, the Center Hub team, we will talk to you guys next episode. And Theo, we appreciate you coming on.
Yep. Thanks for having me.